Hey, how you doing? Scotty from scotsbassists.com, and today I'm going to be talking about walking bass lines, but it's a little bit different. So here's the deal. Every week in the Academy over at Scott's Bass Lessons, we release something called the Academy Show. And in that show, we talk about what's coming up, what's going on, stuff to get excited about for all the Academy members. But also we talk about topics in the campus, which is our forum within the Academy. And one of our members was talking about how to expand his walking bass lines. He feels like he's got to a certain level, but he wants to expand them a little further. And we thought this was a really, really great topic to talk about in the show this week, because walking bass lines is just one of the best ways to nail your fingerboard and really, really get to grips with how to move around and how to use arpeggios and chord tones and chromatic passing notes. All of that stuff I learned directly from walking bass lines. So even if you're not into jazz, they are so, so important. So what you're going to watch today is a conversation between myself and Jeff Chalmers, where we're giving George, the member in the Academy, we're giving him tips on how to move his walking bass lines to the next level. But this is really applicable to you as well if you're into walking bass or thinking about getting into walking bass. You should be if you're not already, because as I said, it's just a killer way to get your fretboard knowledge and your facility around the actual fretboard to that next level, and ultimately your bass playing as a whole to that next level. Now, if you are an Academy member, this is just a short snippet from the Academy Show. You can watch the entire Academy Show if you just click the link in the YouTube description. It'll take you over to Scott's Bass Lessons and you can log in. If you're not an Academy member, click the link and you can grab your 14-day free trial. And guys, if you do go and watch the entire Academy Show, okay, that this is taken from, the clip that you're about to see, you've got to check out the end. You've got to check out the end. It's insanely funny. It's Gav, one of our videographers, has been up to no good. That's all I'm going to say. Check out the end of the Academy Show over at scotsbassists.com. He is a mean man. Anyway, let's talk about walking bass lines.
So George's question was, how can I make my walking bass lines more interesting? And I just want to...
George Gardner.
Yeah, sorry, George, yeah.
Hey, George, if you're watching. George is a dude from the from the campus.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so he's been, and there's actually some great responses in there that you can go and check out already. But I just
What's his question? Yeah.
So his question is, how can I make my walking bass lines more interesting? And I think one of the problems that everybody has is that when they start realizing how fundamentally embedded with chord tones and arpeggios this process is, in the same way that it would be if you were playing chords on a piano or chords on a guitar, it's the same core knowledge that you need. Is when you do it at first, it can sound quite twee because you sort of tend to play everything ascending. You tend to be in one, repeating yourself a lot. You tend to be in one block, and you go from this, and it's hard to learn that. And you'll suddenly think, well, this sounds dull. It sounds a bit twee. Well, what you don't realize is if you use the same information and just continue in the same direction, you'll open up the fingerboard, and from there, you'll be able to play like broken arpeggios in different ways. Yeah. You'll be able to use chord tones in really creative, new fashions that you'll never have thought of. And I'm always learning new ways through it. But there is a bit of a bump that you've got to go over at the start where it will sound a little bit contrived.
You're going to play the same lines over and over again.
Exactly.
Which is not what walking bass is about.
So when you get there, that's, just be aware that you might have that experience and you'll need to keep going. But then afterwards, you just start to see this enormous range of possibilities. But this is all within the subject of applying chord tones to your walking bass lines. Have you got any particular tips, or maybe throw back a few ideas about how to make walking bass lines more interesting?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the first things that you should do when you're, once you've got the walking bass happening, you can play around a 2-5-1 or, using a repeated line. Maybe you're not improvising yet, but you're using a repeated line. So what you need to do after that is think about what is that repeated line that you're playing. Well, that is a bit of vocabulary, that you can use over, say, for instance, a 2-5-1. Yeah. Well, then you need to start searching out different players, Ron Carter, Paul Chambers, Dave Holland, Christy McBride. How many recordings of these guys exist on YouTube or on albums where they're playing over 2-5-1s? A gazillion, right? Yeah. So then you find those guys, the greatest walkers in the world.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Walk Like a Dinosaur, that's a great tune as well. Anyway, the greatest walking bass players in the world, and then you find them playing, simple standards, and they're out there on YouTube. You'll be able to find them.
Yeah.
And then you find out what they're doing over like 251, for instance.
Yeah.
And then you work it out. And then you memorize it. And then every time you play, you see that 251, you're like, oh, I'm going to play that Ron Carter thing over there. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And now I've played it like 100 times and I'm bored to tears with it. And then, okay, well, I saw that Paul Chambers, he did that different. He did it a little bit differently. And now I'm going to do that. So what you're doing there is you're getting these guys and you're using them as learning tools, learning their lines and getting it onto your instrument. And the most important bit is that you are making their language part of your own language, building your vocabulary up. So if you see a 251, you've got various bits of vocab that you can just simply plug into that 251. If you see a minor chord, an extended minor chord, let's say 4 bars of D minor, well, what did Paul Chambers play over 4 bars of D minor? You need to transcribe that stuff and get it into your playing in such a way that when you see 4 bars of D minor, you can literally think, it's like one step under improvising, right? You're plugging in these things. Now I'm going to get to the improvising thing in a minute. You're just plugging in these bits of vocabulary. And I got it to the point where I could name the people as I played. I'd be like, that's that Paul Chambers line. Oh, that's that Dave Holland line that he used on this album. I'll tell you what, I do all the time. I use this one bit of vocabulary that Anthony Jackson used. He used it on a Michelle Patriciani album with Bob Brookmeyer, the trombone player, on it, and Steve Gadd on kit. And he did this turnaround. And I worked it out and I got it in my vocab, and I use it all the time. So that's the first thing. And then what comes after that, and you should do that all the time, but what comes after that is then that then gets turned into your own vocabulary, and then you start mixing them. Mixing these elements. So what happens if I go and you start seeing
learning
it,
in different learning phrases and different keys will really, really help you to go beyond just like I have a really bad habit of playing the same phrases in the same keys. And I really should just sit down and learn them properly in all 12 keys, and then I'll be able to be more fluid and break them up into new ways. And
Another tip is don't work on a million different standards at once. Just take,
great tip.
1 or 2 standards and just rinse them for everything you can get. Get on YouTube, find great players walking over those, figure out what they're doing and just absolutely immerse yourself in them standards. So a great pianist, Bill Evans, the pianist, he was like fantastic. He did multiple albums where he played the same tracks over and over.
Is one that he did loads. There's so many beautiful recordings of him playing.
And he was just beautiful love. He's done some great, Eddie Gomez on bass, man. Wow. So that's a great tip. Moving around, making sure that you can, once you've got the initial stuff that I've talked about now, once you've got that down, then, as you said, moving it around the fretboard so you can do it in different keys. Bill Evans, talking about Bill Evans, what he used to do is he'd learn a tune inside out and then he'd change key. And it'd be a completely different learning experience.
The level of knowledge of playing a song in different keys fluently is just on a completely different level to being able to play it in one key.
When I was talking to Chris Cheney, who plays with like Jane's Addiction. And so here's a great example of somebody that knows his instrument inside out. He's a fantastic bass player, plays with Jane's Addiction, right? You wouldn't think it, but that guy can play walking bass lines till the cows come home. Anyway, he's like living with Gary Novak. He moves to LA. If you checked out the podcast, you can, it's like one of the first podcasts we did on Scott's Bass Lessons. And he gets his, bass out and shows you some of the techniques he was using. But anyway, he moved to LA. He's living with Gary Novak, and Gary Novak's dad, they used to jam together. So Gary Novak's obviously the, super uber awesome drummer, and a killing bass player, actually. Not many people know that. And I think he plays a ton of other instruments. But, he was like playing with Gary, and Gary's dad used to come round and he said they'd like play a standard. And then he said like mid tune, he'd be like, okay, upper minor third. And the whole tune would be transposed upper minor third. And then you need to play at Beautiful Love, upper minor third, down a fifth. Then you'd have to play, and it's really keying back into that Bill Evans thing. So multiple keys and get used to it over the fingerboard. Another one that's really good is limiting yourself to where you play on the instrument. So think to yourself, okay, right, I'm going to nail this tune, let's say All the Things You Are, in the first 5 frets. Okay, and I cannot move out the first 5 frets.
Yeah.
And then after you can do that, which might take a while, now I'm going to play All the Things You Are from the 5th to the 9th fret, and I'm not going to move. Generally, I like to take 4 frets and one either side, so that would be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So the 5th fret to the 10th fret and not move out of that zone.
I mean, you could practice that for the next year.
Oh, this is big stuff. And then again, talking about limiting yourself, another fantastic, and I got this from studying with Gary Willis, is limiting yourself in terms of the amount of strings you can walk on.
Yeah.
So if I had a bass, I'd be able to show you that. But essentially, Gary was like, okay, I want you to walk around an F blues, but you can only use 2 strings.
Right.
Okay. And we'd walk around an F jazz blues sequence, just using the E and the A string. And then once I could do that, I'd do it on the E, the A and the D string. And then once I'd done that, I'd do it on the D and the G string. And then I can actually play around a walking bass line on 1 string. And it'll sound like a walking bass line, just because I practiced it. So try walking around, like doing a great walking bass line around an F blues with just 1 string.
One of these things about using the harmony in that way as well is that it also improves your fingerboard or fretboard knowledge. And it's one of those things that we assume that you know where all of these notes are. And actually, when you start doing exercises like that, we all realise we can all improve that. Because I know where the note C is, and I knew where it was 10 years ago, or all over the bass, but I know it so much more now, than I did then.
Yeah.
And it's like this ongoing process. Do you want me to fire out a few more, Scott, or have you still got some to get?
Listen,
I've got some short ones because I thought what I could do is just do it in a slightly different way. So the first one is that you should be...
Have you made notes?
No, this happens to be some notes I made when I replied to someone a while ago about the topic, but I remembered I had some... I've made notes, but not specifically for this.
Right.
But
I'll make notes next time.
Okay, yeah. I'm going to be like, yeah. So the first one is that everything what you're playing should be melodic phrases that make sense. And I know it's so obvious to say that, but when you listen to Christian McBride and get his Conversations with Christian McBride album, so it's just double bass and then one other instrument, and really listen to the bass on its own, and all of the lines are musical phrases. And to do that, you need to obviously understand your harmony all over the fretboard, but you also have to have this freedom of being able to play everything descending as well as ascending. People have a way, you follow the path of least resistance, so you tend to play the same things the same way, and people like Christian have got this ultimate freedom, but be thinking about melodic phrases, and that means tension and resolution. There should be an idea that you introduce, and then you play with the people's expectation of hearing it again, and then resolve it in a cool way. So that's a really, really interesting thing to do. Another thing that you should always be outlining the harmony. So if there's no piano player playing, you can really hear the chord progression move by. And if there is a piano player playing, great, you can hear it as well. But you should never be in a situation where it just sounds like
ambiguous
chord tones. The other thing is, people sometimes misunderstand about the role that the beats 2 and 4 have. So you should be hearing the pulse on 2 and 4. So be 1, 2, 1, 2. So 2 and 4. We talked about this a lot. Okay. It makes it feel really differently. But one of the mistakes that people make sometimes is that they actually accent beats 2 and 4. And it's not that you accent those notes, it's just that you tap your foot. And you'll find that it feels very different to beats 1 and 3.
Can I also say, just tying in with that the harmony within a bar, the strong notes
are 1 and 3.
Are 1 and 3.
Yeah.
And if you're going to put passing tones, you want to put them on 2 and 4.
Absolutely.
Just a little ditty to throw in there.
And lastly, Scott, just thinking about rhythm as well, is that really having this strict strong triplet pulse underneath. And when you're adding in fills, make sure you add them in a really careful way where your fills are landing on the subdivision of the triplet. And sometimes people are a bit vague about, it's da-da-da-dum, it's not really very clear. And it's one of those things that I'm working on in my playing all the time. And the people that swing Christian McBride I keep thinking about, or John Patitucci, you can hear the divisions of the beat really clearly. So you should be thinking about triplets when you're playing in a swing style. In the same way that you should be thinking about straight quavers
and don't overdo
notes.
It.
Yeah, it is really distracting. Studying fills is a real kind of thing.
I watched the lesson with Chris Tarry. Great player, man. And he did I can't even remember, it might be knocking around YouTube somewhere. And Chris did he was talking about walking bass lines, and his point was don't, put all these triplet fills in everywhere, and he was just playing real nice wide quarter notes, and no accents on anything, and it just felt huge, And I think that's something that everybody, myself included, always falls into, you know, dung 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 dung.
Yeah.
You know, trying not to do that. Trying, you know, listen to those guys. You know, Paul Chambers, Ron Carter.
You learn a new technique like pedal tones or using triplet fills and pull-offs, and you put them in
just use
every
them all
single
the time.
possible
Yeah,
opportunity.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
listen,
And that's part of the learning process as well.
So, George, I mean, we've talked about a lot of stuff there, just to give you a whole range of ideas. But we know.
I thought of one cool.
Oh, go on, finish us off. Go on, give us one more.
Off, baby. Going from third to third. So instead of
Third to seventh.
No, third to third. Yeah. It's like a little exercise.
What do you mean?
So what I like to do is take a walking bass line such as like Autumn Leaves, right? So it starts with a 2-5-1 and start off going from like root to root. So do da da do da do da dee da 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 da. So that's sort of like root to root. From C to F to B flat to E flat, right? And I'm just filling it in with the arpeggio tones, right? So then go from third to third. So you start on the third of the chord on beat 1, and then on the next bar, you have to land on the third of the chord tone on the next bar, and then the third of the chord. So you're going from third. So on each, of beat 1 of each bar is the actual third of the chord.
Yeah.
And it's breaking you away from always landing on the root, essentially.
Yeah.
So instead of ba dee da do da do da dee da da do do da, instead of that you'll get bo do da dee da 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 dee da dee da dee da da da. So that's sort of like the third of C minor, going to the third of F dominant, going to the third of B flat, going to the third of E flat. And it's just, again, it's kind of like the playing walking bass lines on 2 strings thing, right?
Yeah.
It's you're not going to get on that stuff. You're not going to do it on a gig. You know, you're not going to do it on a gig.
No.
What you're going to do is put yourself your brain under extreme pressure in a practice situation. So it's forcing you to learn the fretboard under extreme conditions.
Completely free.
Yeah.
When you play, you just play, don't you?
It's stopping you falling into the same old crap that you always play. And then when you get on the gig, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
You know, well, within realms. Bow chicka wow wow.
That's,
One, two, bow chicka wow wow.
It's all about the bow chaka wow wow.
Bow chicka wow. You know, you've seen that YouTube video.
Okay,
Drummer
great.
on the wrong gig. I'd love a bass player on the wrong gig.
Yeah.
1, 2.
So if anyone wants to do that. But George, thanks for your question. And please jump in, everyone watching, and give us some more thoughts. I mean, it's such a massive topic. We could, as you can tell, we could talk about this for a long time.
Yeah,
That's why we decided not to talk about anything else today, because frankly, like
have we got anything else going on the
got
campus?
stuff to do.
The 2015 Kickstarter challenge.
Hey everybody.
Hey.
Hey everybody.
Hi everybody.
Hello all.